It's time for the news.
Algeria has received a note for the acceptance of Algeria's mediation aimed at fostering a political solution to the crisis in Niger as part of the settlement plan presented by the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmadjid Tebboune. The President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmadjid Tebboune, has stressed during the Council of Ministers the implementation or the importance of ensuring the strict implementation of the state's plan to organize importation and ensure the availability of various products. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has stated that the terrorists will never achieve their aims in Turkey hours after a blast near the parliament in Ankara injured two police officers. Those were the headlines, and now the news in detail from Radio Algeria International. First, the Algerian government has received through its Ministry of Foreign Affairs a note for the acceptance of Algeria's mediation aimed at fostering a political solution to the crisis in Niger as part of the settlement plan presented by the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmadjid Tebboune. The acceptance of Algeria's initiative comes in support of the political solution to the Niger crisis and paves the way for meeting all the conditions allowing for its peaceful settlement for the benefit of Niger and the whole region. Following the acceptance, the President of the Republic entrusted the Minister of Foreign Affairs and the National Community Abroad, Ahmed Attaf, with traveling to Niamey as soon as possible in order to launch preparatory discussions on the implementation of Algeria's initiative with all the stakeholders. The President of the Republic has stressed during the Council of Ministers the importance of ensuring the strict implementation of the state's plan to organize importation and ensure the availability of various products. The President said the state funding of all consumption products will always be guaranteed regardless of the prices in international markets. Meanwhile, the Council of Ministers adopted the declaration of the government's general policy presented by the Prime Minister. The President affirmed that the state will keep working to rid the country of the repercussions of the previous period. The Council of Ministers also decided to increase the stipend of university students with 2,000 Algerian dinars. In the sector of agriculture, the President ordered the head of the sector to compensate the farmers affected by the drought and grant them free of charge fertilizers. The President also ordered during the Council of Ministers the evaluation of all decisions taken by the Council of Ministers which have not yet been applied. Still with the domestic file, the President of the Legal, Administrative and Freedoms Business Committee at the People's National Assembly, Ahmed Boubacar, has received a delegation of the Saudi Commission for Human Rights here in Algiers. The two parties recalled the brotherly relations linking the two countries. Mr. Boubacar then recalled Saudi Arabia's diplomatic and material support to Algeria during the war for independence. He said Algeria has guaranteed in all its constitutions the rights and freedoms, recalling that 2020 constitutional revision, which culminated in the creation of the Human Rights National Council and the Youth Higher Council. For his part, the Vice President of the Saudi Commission for Human Rights, Hashim bin Abdurrahman Al Sheikh, affirmed that in the framework of Saudi Arabia's 2030 vision, several reforms have been initiated in all fields, more than 100 of which are in favor of human rights. A delegation of the Algerian National Committee of Solidarity with the Sahrawi People has headed to New York in the framework of the UN 78th General Assembly to petition before the members of the Fourth Committee in charge of political and decolonization issues on the issue of Western Sahara. The Algerian delegates will plead for the effective and rapid organization of a self-determination referendum for the benefit of the Sahrawi people. The delegation is expected to denounce the colonization of Morocco to Western Sahara and repeated human rights violations against peaceful Sahrawi civilians. A high-level Chinese delegation made up of officials from the Xinjiang Autonomous Region in Western China will visit Algiers next week to discuss bilateral cooperation opportunities. Preparations are underway ahead of the Chinese delegation arrival to Algiers, which comes after the state visit made by the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmadjid Tebboune, to China last July, and which opened up broad prospects to cooperation and partnership between the two countries through the signing of some 20 agreements and memoranda of understanding in several sectors. To the international arena now, where Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has stated that terrorists will never achieve their aims in Turkey. In his address at the country's parliament, or shortly after or hours after a blast near the parliament in Ankara, which injured 2 police officers. Asya Bakar has more details in this report.
The speech came hours after a Sunday attack on the Interior Ministry located very close to the Parliament building. Erdogan said yesterday's terrorist act in Ankara is the last flutters of terrorism. 2 police officers have been injured in a suicide bombing attack in front of the Interior Ministry in the Turkish capital, Ankara. Their wounds were not life-threatening. Both attackers are dead. One detonated himself while the other was killed, according to Turkish authorities. Turkish Foreign Minister has also said that the attack in Ankara will not stop the government's determination to fight against terrorism. The Kurdistan Workers' Party PKK claimed responsibility for the suicide attack, and Turkey says its warplanes have carried out raids on Kurdish targets in northern Iraq following the suicide attack on the government building in capital Ankara. The Turkish Interior Ministry said about 20 targets of the PKK group were destroyed in the aerial operation, including caves, shelters and depots.
And several countries and organizations have condemned the terrorist attack that targeted the Interior Ministry in Ankara, notably Algeria, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Jordan, Kuwait, the Arab League, the European Union, among others. A huge fire that erupted at a police complex in the Egyptian city of Ismailia, wounding at least 38 people, has been contained after several hours. Media sources said no fatalities were immediately reported over the blaze that happened early on Monday, but hospitals were placed on alert. The cause of the blaze, which broke out at the headquarters of the Ismailia Security Directorate before dawn, is not yet known. Of 26 wounded who were transferred to a local hospital, 24 had suffered from asphyxiation and 2 from burns, according to the same source. Videos on social media showed flames soaring from the city's security directorate early, and it appeared the building's main facade had collapsed. The health ministry deployed 50 ambulances to the scene, which were joined by military emergency services, including 2 planes, according to state media. For his part, the founder and director of the European North African Center for Research said Egyptians were wary of possible attacks before the presidential polls in December in 2023. And the United Nations has called for enhancing the culture of peace, forgiveness, and nonviolence on the occasion of the International Day of Nonviolence. The International Day of Nonviolence is observed on October 2nd, the birthday of Mahatma Gandhi, leader of the Indian independence movement and pioneer of the philosophy and strategy of nonviolence. According to General Assembly Resolution of 15 June 27, which established the commemoration, the International Day is an occasion to disseminate the message of nonviolence, including through education and public awareness. The resolution affirms or reaffirms the universal relevance of the principle of nonviolence and the desire to secure a culture of peace, tolerance, understanding, and nonviolence. Introducing the resolution in the General Assembly on behalf of 140 co-sponsors, India's Minister of State for External Affairs, Anand Sharma, said that the wide and diverse sponsorship of the resolution was a reflection of the universal respect for Mahatma Gandhi and of the enduring relevance of his philosophy. Quoting the late leader's own words, he said, "Nonviolence is the greatest force at the disposal of mankind. It is mightier than the mightiest weapon of destruction advised by the ingenuity of man." And now the leader of the separatist enclave Nagorno-Karabakh has promised to stay in the capital of the territory until the end of the rescue operations. Asya Bakar has more.
He said he will stay with a group of officials until the end of rescue operations and the search for missing people due to military operations and explosion of a fuel depot at the end of September. Yesterday, UN mission arrived in Karabakh mainly to assess humanitarian needs. It marks the first time in about 30 years that the international body has gained access to the region. UN spokesperson Stefan Dujarric said earlier that the UN team will seek to assess the situation on the ground and identify the humanitarian needs for both people remaining and the people that are on the move. He said the focus will be on humanitarian and also, as part of that, on issues of protection. Earlier, an Azerbaijani government official said media would also be allowed to visit the region. Nearly all of Karabakh's estimated 120,000 residents fled the territory over the following days, sparking a refugee crisis.
The U.S. government has barely avoided a shutdown. With just hours to spare, the House, defying its most conservative Republican members, passed a short-term funding measure with the support of a majority of Democrats and Republicans. The Senate quickly moved to pass it, and President Joe Biden signed the bill into law. But just because House Speaker Kevin McCarthy managed to find a last-minute solution, it does not mean that the government is magically working well. Nor it is a sign that McCarthy has figured out a way to bring his Republican conference together. By agreeing to this spending deal, the government did something it has rarely done this year: enact a bill or resolution. There had been 14 bills and resolutions that have become law since the start of this Congress in January, prior to this stopgap measure to keep the government open if that strikes a small number. Since 1973, an average of about 70 bills or resolutions have been enacted through roughly this point in a Congress in which the House and presidency are controlled by different parties. And finally, Hungarian-born Katalin Karikó and Drew Winson of the U.S. have won the 2023 Nobel Prize in physiology or medicine for their research that led directly to the first mRNA vaccines to fight COVID-19 made by Pfizer and Moderna. Asia Bakar had more details in this report.
The jury said the laureates contributed to the unprecedented rate of vaccine development during one of the greatest threats to human health in modern times. Katalin Karikó is a professor at Szeged University in Hungary and an adjunct professor at the University of Pennsylvania. Drew Weissman conducted his prize-winning research together with Karikó at the University of Pennsylvania. The pair will receive their prize consisting of a diploma, a gold medal, and $1 million check from King Carl Gustaf at a formal ceremony in Stockholm on December 10, the anniversary of the death of scientist Alfred Nobel. He created the prizes in his last will and testament. The frontrunners for this year's award in medicine included Kevan Shokat, an American biologist who figured out how to block the KRAS cancer gene behind a third of cancers, including challenging to treat lung, colon, and pancreatic tumors. Two American biologists, Stanislas Leibler and Michael Ilowitz, were also in the run for the work on synthetic gene circuits, which established the field of synthetic biology. It enables scientists to redesign organisms by engineering them to have new abilities. The Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine was won last year by Swedish scientist Staventi Paavo for discoveries in human evolution that unlocked secrets of Neanderthal DNA, which provided key insights into our immune system, including our vulnerability to severe COVID-19. The Physics Prize will be announced on Tuesday, Chemistry on Wednesday, and Literature on Thursday. The Nobel Peace Prize will be announced on Friday, and the Economics Award on October 9.
And with this, we come to the end of this news bulletin for today. Time now for a weekly program, starting with an economic program by my colleague Saad Boughazi, as every week. And it will be followed by another program on the region of Janat in the south of Algeria by my colleague Mazar Desfar. As for me, I'll meet you again tomorrow for a fresh edition of our news bulletin. Then stay tuned to Radio Algeria International, and bye-bye for now.
Hi and welcome to our weekly program devoted to Algerian economic news. First in the news, the Minister of Trade and Export Promotion, Tayyip Zitouni, has said that Algeria is committed to achieving economic integration and complementarity in Africa. In a speech read on his behalf by the Minister of Transport, Youssef Sherfa, at the opening of the high-level promotional tour of Algeria for the Intra-African Trade Fair IATF 2023 slated for next month in Egypt, Tayyip Zitouni reaffirmed the Algerian government's commitment to achieving the noble objectives set out by the founders of the African Union, notably as regards continental integration and economic complementarity. The Minister of Energy and Mines, Mohamed Arkab, has announced in the province of Mascara that a dozen projects of non-ferrous mining products would soon be commissioned in various regions of the country. The Minister underlined that these are projects for the production of non-ferrous products such as calcium, magnesium, and manganese carbonates, which will make it possible to supply raw materials to our country's processing industries, which will be able to turn themselves into exporters of these products. More in our program, the National Association of Tourism Experts has held its Constituent Assembly in Algiers with the election of its president, Abdelrahman Begat. On this occasion, Saïd Boukhalifa was appointed Secretary General of the association, which also elected its officers and national members. The association's president stressed the importance of creating this space to bring together experts, specialists, and researchers in the field of tourism to exchange views and ideas and to contribute to boosting the tourism activity. The U.S. ambassador to Algiers, Elizabeth Moore-Obin, who was on a visit to the eastern province of Tizi Ouzou, was the guest of the regional radio of Tizi Ouzou. During the interview, she evoked the Algerian-U.S. relations at the political and economic levels. Regarding economic relations, she said that increasing bilateral economic relations was one of their priorities.
So this is a very important priority of mine, is to expand and deepen the U.S.-Algeria economic relationship. It's a dynamic one. Our two-way trade has doubled every year for the last 3 years, and I want to continue to double that number. Over 100 U.S. companies operate here in Algeria, and so in our model, we transfer technology, we hire Algerians, and you'll find at the head of many U.S. companies in Algeria an Algerian country manager. In 2020, the IMF said that the U.S. was the largest foreign direct investor in Algeria. I'd like to continue to increase that amount as well, and I discuss our economic partnership and our bilateral trade relationship, and had a great conversation, in fact, with President Tebboune about that 2 weeks ago. We both agree that increasing our bilateral economic relationship will be win-win for our two countries.
Speaking about the direct flight linking Algiers with New York, the U.S. ambassador to Algiers had this to say.
You know, a direct flight from Algeria to the United States, would it be an incredible driving force that would catapult our economic relationship to an entirely new level? It would also do the same for our people-to-people ties, because not having to stop in a European city and wait for 8 hours for your connection, but getting to New York, let's say, from Algiers in 8.5 hours, would be an incredibly motivating factor for people to buy from the U.S., buy from Algeria, increase our trade, our tourism numbers. It would facilitate, of course, travel for both U.S. business people, Algerian business people, but also Algeria is about to take its seat at the UN General Assembly on the Security Council. Wouldn't it be great to have a direct flight directly into the United Nations?
The U.S. ambassador to Algiers talked about importing 2 different kinds of bovine genetics.
This is a very critical part of our economic relationship. President Tebboune told me when I first came to Algeria in February of 2022 that his number one priority was food security. And so I have been working very hard from the U.S. side on achieving advances in that area of our relationship. So what's happened since then. We've gotten 2 certificates to import 2 different kinds of bovine genetics. This will help enormously here in Algeria with both dairy cows and beef. This is in addition to the genetics that we have been importing for the last 15 years or so for chicken and turkey.
That was the U.S. Ambassador to Algiers, Elizabeth Moore-Obin, who was the guest of the regional radio of Tizi Ouzou. At its weekly meeting chaired by Prime Minister Ayman bin Abdurrahman, the government has examined the state of progress of the rehabilitation, extension and development of the Green Dam, according to a press release from the Prime Minister's office. The document added that this strategic project of national importance aims to preserve the national ecosystem in its ecological, environmental and socio-economic dimensions through programs to protect and strengthen resources and improve the quality of life of the local population, and is part of a sustainable development perspective, creating wealth and jobs. And to wind up our program, the National Agency for Resource Development, Al-Naft, has organized a meeting with oil companies operating in Algeria in the presence of the national energy company Sonatrach, said the agency in a press release. Through this meeting, Al-Naft is establishing a platform for communication and exchanges with oil companies operating in Algeria in the presence of the national company Sonatrach, explained the same source. And with this, we come to the end of our weekly program devoted to Algerian economic news. Goodbye.
Janet is an oasis city in southeast Algeria. It is located in Elezi province, 412 kilometers from Elezi. It is inhabited by the Kel Ager Tuareg people. It is the capital of Janet district. In the heart of the Sahara, an unworldly mountain range pierces the sky with its pillars. The Hogar Massif contrasts sharply with the volcanic and dune landscape, the very soul of the Sahara. The view from Askram, 2,600 meters, is an overwhelming sight, and the views of the great sand ergs of the Sahara. This is the land of the Tuareg people, with Janet and Tamanrasset being at the center of their culture. A desert town situated deep in the Sahara, the vast sea of dunes to the south of Janet, the camp at the edge of the dunes watching how the sunlight plays on the shadows and contours of the dunes with subtle changes of color. Askram, one of the highest peaks in the spectacular Atakor Mountains. It is a tough ride through rough and impressive terrain to get to Askram, the hermitage of Father Foucault, the French priest who built the chapel here in 1911. He came to the Hogar to study Tuareg culture, but was killed in Tamanrasset in 1916 during a revolt against the French. Experiencing the view from the hermitage is enough to give us the feeling we have reached the soul of the desert. Tuareg is the name that was applied to them by early explorers and historians since Leo Africanus. They call themselves Kel Tamshek, speakers of Tamshek, and Imuhar, Imuhar, Imaziran, or Imasharan, the free people. The Tuareg people also call themselves Keltak el-Must, that is to say, people of the veil. Tuareg Leos Africanus was the Christianized name of Hassan bin Muhammad al-Wazan al-Fasi, a former inhabitant of Grenada. His family left the city sometimes after the Christian conquest of the Muslim kingdom in 1492. Origin of the meaning of the name Tuareg has long been debated with various etymologies advanced, although it would appear that Tuareg is derived from the broken plural of Tergi, an Arabic name whose former meaning was inhabitant of Terga. Traditional Tuareg music has two major components: the monochord violin and zad, played often during night parties, and a small tambour covered with goat skin called tindi, performed during camel races and horse races. Another popular Tuareg music genre is takamba, characteristic for its Afro-Berber percussions. The anzad is a musical instrument. Many traditional musicians emerged after the 1980s cultural revival. Among them is Uthman Bali from Janet. Mubarak Uthmani, known as Uthman Bali or Bali, was born in 1953 in Janet. Born into a family of musicians in the Tassili Aja, a mountainous region about 2,000 kilometers southeast of Algiers. He owes much to his mother Khadija, herself a virtuoso on the imzad, the single-string violin of the desert. It was she who taught him his mother tongue, the language of music, which he embellished and propelled, leading him to become Algeria's most respected and loved Tuareg composer, singer, and oud player, the bard of the Saharan blues. He was also admired for his great sense of humor, his frankness, his exuberance, and infectious joy for life. He used to sit cross-legged on the stage, dressed in the purest blue robes, and surrounded by 4 generations of his family. Bali perished during flash floods that took place in the Sahara during June 2005. The distinctive twang of his oud, either on the radio or television, the whole presence of Bali's resonating note, a presence that is still very much alive. Then his voice comes in, all warm, commanding, and reassuring, a magnetic quality. It is like being transported into a pure and true noble, yet humble place. The journalist and human rights activist Olivia Marceau paid a homage to late Uthman Bali. Without you, Janet is an orphan, a people lost in the traces of your footsteps. Since you left us, life doesn't continue. Not really, anyway. The floods which took you away, had they been nurtured by your poetry, by your generosity? What surging destiny, you who were like the very water that is desert's element, you who were the inkle for this waterless river contained in the caves of your oud, you who were the river of wisdom. This is Bali. It speaks of the sanctity of a man imbued by goodness. What a difficult task it is to describe the exceptional man that you were. You, the reed of the Tindi music, the haughty reed of Tinjad, who bent only to pray. Yes, you, prince of the Tuareg troubadours, the immortal stone of Tassili.